Today I want to talk about Castlevania Bloodlines, which is more than just the one that released on Genesis. It's actually often forgotten that it even existed, which is a shame because the game is right up there with one of my all-time favorites in the entire franchise. The gameplay is faster, it's more intense, the setting is absolutely gorgeous. It really was a good year for Konami in 1994, and this game also sets the post-Castlevania Symphony of the Night lore by introducing the Morris family. The Morris family are descendants of the Belmonts, with it being said later in the lore that they came from the female side, which is why their last name is Morris. One of Trevor's daughters is the progenitor of this line of Belmonts. In order to bring the Dracula universe together, the developers decided that they were going to include Bram Stoker's Dracula in this. John Morris is the son of Quincy Morris, the man who killed Dracula in Bram Stoker's Dracula by driving a wooden stake through his heart. He ends up dying as a result of the battle, but that's the lineage that he is a part of. And they're now saying that that's a descendant of the Belmont family. So I think that's actually a really cool way to include Bram Stoker's Dracula as being the Dracula of all of these Castlevania games, the same one that the Belmont family has been fighting for centuries. This is also the first Castlevania game that was scored by Michiru Yamane, famous after this game for Symphony of the Night. This was her breakout game. And the music in this game is absolutely phenomenal. And the game opens up level 1, music's going, and it's very similar to the opening of the original Castlevania, where you get your first couple of power-ups outside, there's this dark, bloody, gothic setting, and then boom, you walk into the castle, and you're just under siege, just like in the first game. So it doesn't have that same slow build-up that Castlevania 4 does. In fact, it's almost the polar opposite of Super Castlevania 4. It's faster, much harder by design, and has 2 playable characters. So the first is John Morris, who has the vampire killer. And the second is Eric Lecarde, who wields the Alucard spear. The lore now says that the Alucard spear was created by Alucard to complement the vampire killer, which is why Eric is able to defeat and kill Dracula in this game if you choose to play as him. As for the music, it had a big shift in tone. It was much grittier, more electric, and it moved past the pure Baroque sound of the previous games, but still deeply gothic. I would look up, if you haven't played this game, Reincarnated Soul. So this game's story, with John Morris and Eric Lecarde, revolves around the fact that Eric's wife was inadvertently killed by Elizabeth Bartley. She's the game's protagonist, as far as the scroll in the beginning tells us. She was killed in 1614 for vampirism, and was raised from the dead by her servant Drolta. Turns out in this universe that Elizabeth Bartley is the niece of Count Dracula. She's seeking to revive him. It takes place in 1914. You're going to follow Elizabeth across Europe, starting in the ruins of Castlevania, and then you're going to go to Greece, Italy, Germany, France, and finally England, where the game will conclude. Each level is incredibly unique. I would say the only somewhat weak level in this game was Germany. It's the munitions factory, so you're fighting a lot of skeletons that are wearing army helmets. In fact, the entire set piece is basically a replacement for the clock tower levels in the Castlevania games, with you going through areas that are very reminiscent with large cogs and wheels. And then the final boss is just a series of gears as a monster. It's definitely the weakest point of this game. Still a fun level, an incredibly challenging level, but definitely the weakest. It does not feel very Castlevania-like at all, but I digress. So the core gameplay of Castlevania Bloodlines was to be much faster and more action-focused. The Genesis, even to the developers, was known to be a more arcade-style system, so action games were very much big on this console. So Konami moved the franchise into this more fast-paced, high difficulty game. Contra Hard Corps released the same year for the Genesis, whereas Super Nintendo had Super Castlevania 4 and Contra 3 Alien Wars. Both of these entries for these games were significantly more difficult than their Super Nintendo counterparts. I would also argue they're both significantly better as well. Castlevania Bloodlines sprite work is just absolutely incredible. The animations are fluid. It's just a very, very, very pretty looking game. I mean, the way that John and Eric walk, it's got that Castlevania 1 and 3 feel to it. It really is something. To me, this is really the 16-bit winner of Castlevania games, where you could argue kind of Rondo of Blood, but really the TurboGrafx 16, as we called it here in the US, wasn't a true 16-bit system. So it's kind of like that in between Rondo. But as far as what games were released in the US, if you're going to pit 16-bit to 16-bit, it was Super Castlevania 4 and Bloodlines to pit against each other, and Bloodlines blows Super Castlevania 4 out of the water. Additionally, with the gameplay, especially for people that like Super Castlevania 4, think of the two characters in this one as having Simon's moveset split across the two of them. John is able to swing from any ceiling using the Vampire Hunter. When he jumps, he can attack upward diagonally, and he can attack down when jumping, but he can't attack diagonally while standing. Eric, on the other hand, with his spear, can attack diagonally while standing, but cannot attack diagonally when jumping. So it's really the two move sets come together to make Simon from Super Castlevania 4. This game also featured different sub-weapons. Notably, it had a boomerang, which is what in the US the cross was really called. So instead in Castlevania Bloodlines, they just made it the boomerang. It's also the best sub-weapon in the game, hands down. It also had, similar to Richter Belmont's item crash ability, which no one knew about in the US yet, as Castlevania Dracula X wouldn't release till 95, and we didn't get Rondo of Blood either. If you pressed up and the sub-weapon attack, you got a special animation with an extra attack that was stronger. Also in this game, weapons can get 3 power-ups, whereas previously it was 2. The third power-up will actually invoke a song from previous Castlevania game, with John Morris. It's Simon's theme in this new rendition done by Yamane, which is just awesome. And it super empowers the whip, kind of makes it almost look like an electric bolt, and it gives this crazy sub-weapon attack that is just grossly overpowered, but one hit and you're knocked out of that mode anyway, and those third power-ups are pretty few and far between, especially if you get hit a lot. It's, from what I understand, based on the amount of candles you attack without getting hit will drop the third power-up, similar to how however many candles you hit without getting hit. In the original Castlevania would get you the double and triple sub-weapon ability. In addition to John and Eric playing differently, levels were actually built specifically to use their abilities. So John is able to swing, so there's certain areas that Eric wouldn't be able to go because he can't swing. However, Eric has a pole vault jump that allows him to jump vertically upwards, bypassing certain points that John would otherwise have to go through different rooms. So they both have different ways of getting through levels, which is really neat. It really increases the replayability of the game. But as I mentioned, it is a much harder game. And it's the first time they removed infinite continues. You get 2 continues in this game. That's it. Then it's game over. So they really want to test you on this, and they do, especially as the game progresses. So from an artistic standpoint, I would say this game is vastly superior to Super Castlevania 4. And not just addition to the level design, which is incredible, especially since you actually have different areas you go to now, as opposed to it just being in the same castle. Not that there weren't varied areas of the castle, but this gives you different parts of Europe, so every place looks unique to the last. And they have unique enemies that will only appear in certain levels. And interestingly enough, that I found very interesting about this is that the Minotaur enemy is in Greece and in Rome. And some people said, well, that's stupid, they reused it. But if you know Greek and Roman history, you know that the Romans basically took Greek mythology and then adopted it into their own and changed the names of the gods to theirs to give it the Romans spin on it. So the Minotaur is actually a very prevalent character in Greek and Roman mythology by virtue of that. So it actually made a lot of sense. that the Minotaur NPC was in both stages. And it's the only enemy that really happens with. So in addition to these, the game utilizes the Sega Genesis hardware and its unique powers. Now, it was limited on cartridge size space, but it made up for it in other areas. So the Italy level, you're going up the Leaning Tower of Pisa, and it's kind of swaying back and forth as you're climbing it, and that sway affects how you're moving upwards. So you could kill yourself very easily if you're not paying attention to your platforming. And then once you're outside of it, you start going across these platforms that will kind of go around it, and you're just kind of watching the tower in the middle spin because you're going around it. Once you get to the top, the boss that you're fighting, the tower is very much spinning, so you need to be aware of where you're standing. You're still only moving left and right, which makes it much more controllable, but you have to think about where the boss is going to hit and where you're going to need to move to because the tower is turning. The best way to picture it is your character is always trying to watch the boss, so it's you're walking and scaling the rim of the tower to do that. It's really unique. And then in Greece, with the rising and falling water, makes the platforming in that very unforgiving because the water doesn't stop raising or falling. And if you fall into the water, that's it. You're done. So you'll go through this area probably quite a few times. Same thing with the Leaning Tower of Pisa. And then you have the final level, which I think is the absolute best final level in any Castlevania game. It opens up, and as you start walking in, the middle of the screen starts to shift out and zoom in, and then the top and bottom thirds are normal. So it's completely distorted in the middle, and you have to figure out platforming with Medusa heads flying over just gaps. And it's rough. And you think that's bad. You get into the next room, the level's upside down, which means your controls are upside down. And there's still areas that you have to platform over pits, and there's those invincible balls, similar to the ones in 4 that are going around the platforms, that will knock you into the pit. So it is brutal platforming and timing. Damn, is it really cool looking though. And speaking of the last level, this is where the game decides, yeah, we've been hard this thus far. Now we're going to really crank it to 11. So not only do you fight one boss, 2 bosses, 3, 4, 5, 6 in a row with no healing in between. So you start to scale and you get to death. You're like, all right, great. Death, he's in every game. Gonna fight him, and then I'll move on to the next boss. Nope. Death comes out and he just starts spinning cards around him. You have to attack the cards. Now, depending on which card you attack, and you will have to attack all of them, will determine if you're going to fight the boss from Greece, from Germany, or from Italy. 2 other cards will just make Death shoot a fireball at you, and then 1 card will actually drop a whole bunch of healing items for you, which is great. There's no inventories. It drops 100 pot roasts. You can only heal to max once, but it's still nice that they do that. But this fight, like I said, you have to fight all 3 of those previous bosses. They're made slightly weaker in that your attacks do more damage to them, but they do just as much damage to you. And once you kill those 3 bosses, you have to fight Death. All right. I mean, he's easier in this game than in previous ones, I will say, unless you try to play defensively. Like I said, if you try to turtle attack this guy, it's not going to work out well, and you will find it to be a very difficult fight. Next, you literally just walk up more stairs. Now you fight Elizabeth Bartley. Her first form is a monster form. It's not terribly difficult, but it can be annoying, and some of her attacks hit pretty damn hard. And again, there'll be no healing at this point. So after you're done with Death, there's no healing until you get up to Elizabeth. So you got to really try to take out Death as strategically with as much health as possible. After you defeat Elizabeth's first form, she goes back and then starts spawning these orbs around her. The idea now is that she's going to teleport to the left and to the right of the screen. When she does this, you have to hit her once, and then she'll teleport to the other side of the screen. You hit her again, she's going to shoot fireballs in between while doing this. Now, if you don't kill her quick enough, you do no damage to her overall health bar, and those orbs that were flying have a special attack that will now unleash. So there's a fire one, there's an electric one, there's a sword one. I don't remember the other one, but I believe there are 4. Now, sometimes you have to attack her 4 times, which will do 3 blocks of her health. And sometimes you have to attack her 6 times. So this part can be tedious, and it can be brutal if you are not getting to her quick enough on each side. Additionally, if you try to camp her on one side or the other by trying to psych it out and get there quicker, she'll psych you out and go to the other side. So it's best to try to stay as central as possible so that she'll ping pong back and forth to make it more predictable. So great, you kill Elizabeth. The game actually makes it seem like you probably just beat the game, but there's no credits. And you can walk off screen to the right. Oh, now Simon's theme kicks in, and it's that really amazing rendition that if you got the 3rd power up with John, that starts playing so you know shit's about to go down. You get upstairs. It's Dracula's casket, the moon's in the background, it lines up perfectly with the windows behind his casket, boom. Lightning flashes, thunder claps, Dracula reborn. You start the fight right there. Now Dracula's fight is 3 phases, instead of 2, with 2 sub-phases. The first phase is like every Castlevania. He's going to shoot fireballs, and different fire attacks actually, and you just have to jump and hit his head. Now if you time it right, you'll attack the flames that he's shooting out at you, regardless of which ones they are, and hit his head, which will prevent you from getting any damage taken. So again, similar to Elizabeth, you want to really pay attention to where he's teleporting and time that jump. Like look at the man's animations so that when you jump and attack, you hit him right as you're able to. It takes a little while to get used to, but once you do, it makes it significantly easier, or I should say more manageable. His second phase has never actually been in any other game. It's almost like he turns into death with a scepter. Now, somebody actually posted a comment saying that there's a very good chance that this is that witch, Drolta, that revived Elizabeth, which makes a lot of sense really. Drolta could have been the human sacrifice to revive Dracula, and in his weakened state, Dracula takes over Drolta's body to fight you after you defeated his first form. There's no confirmation on this, but I really like that theory, and the sprite for this phase basically looks like a flying old witch. It's death, but with a scepter instead of a scythe, so it makes a lot of sense. If anyone has confirmation on that, please comment that below, because I would love to know if that's the reality of that fight. But you defeat that version, and now very similar to Symphony of the Night, they do the transformation into the monster form. You get this really cool background effect going on, and what I will say is probably the ugliest of his monster forms. I'm not really particularly fond of this model, but it's kind of neat that he has a mouth at his waist, I guess. But yeah, now he has a monster form. And yeah, this one can be really brutal as well. Again, the game rewards offense. You'll notice that as soon as you hit him, he will fly to the left or right of the screen. Now, when he does this, you can keep him locked there by attacking with timed sub-weapon attacks or timed whip or spear attacks. It's just all about the timing. Once you get him down to about 3/4 health, he'll go into that second phase, or maybe around like 60%, or maybe 50% health. He turns red. He now gets really angry and he starts shooting fire flames out. Now again, if you have him off screen, not really off screen, but if you have him off on the sides, you can duck below the flames that are shooting. You can either throw your sub weapons up, the axe is best for this fight, or as soon as he does that, you can stand up, get a jump whip in, and it'll keep him in the corner, which makes it much more manageable as opposed to him flying everywhere. Again, one hit forces him to go left or right, so the game is really telling you, like, this is how you're going to want to manage this guy. Once you get him down to about 1/4 health, he'll turn into his second sub-phase, where it's similar to Symphony of the Night, where he's hopping, and you have to kind of run underneath him, but of course, because they decided to make this one more difficult, he's just spraying bones and showers them down on you. So not only do you have to try to get under him, but you need to dodge those bones as well. It's rough. But once you beat it, you beat the game. And it's totally worth it. I mean, the game is just so much fun. It's incredibly frustrating at times, but once you figure out how to play through these levels, each subsequent playthrough, you get better, you get faster, your score gets higher. It's really something. And then they decided, well, Congratulations, you beat it on normal. You want the real ending for both characters? You just unlocked expert mode. You do less damage and take more. And then you could do that. Hard pass for me. I did it once, and that's all I needed to do. But that is Castlevania Bloodlines. I would argue it is easily one of the best in the franchise. It is, I think I've said this previously before, it's like right there with Rondo of Blood and Symphony of the Night for me. It's basically neck and neck with Rondo for me as far as the classic Vania styles go. Although I tend to say Rondo is more of the hybrid style, where it's kind of the start to the Metroidvania ones, taking some of the ideas from Castlevania 2, and then Ego really taking everything else with Symphony from Rondo being a direct sequel. If you have not played Castlevania Bloodlines, totally worth it. It's part of the Anniversary Collection. Or if you have a Sega Genesis, believe it or not, this one doesn't, well, you know what, it's been a while since I've looked up cartridge prices, but this one used to not actually be that expensive because it was pretty unknown. It didn't do super well, especially in the States. So it never really got that high pricing that certain other games did. But who knows what it looks like today, because it seems like Castlevania is having a resurgence. But yeah, Castlevania Bloodlines, absolutely one of the best, and totally recommend playing.